And we're back here at Boom and Bust with Tristin Hopper. He's a journalist at the National Post, and he is, I guess, the first reading newsletter curator. We should make that point as well. Tristin, we were just about to get into the state of our private sector. You have touched upon this in terms of being cloistered from competition, but if you can expand on what that means and what its impact is.
So I was stealing the ideas. I don't have original ideas of my own, but there is an excellent article written about this policy options by the economists Gagne and Delorier, the most boring sounding folk duo. But anyway, they sort of broke down before this was a major headline issue. They're just looking at rates of falling productivity. And they said, well, this is private sector. So Canada, more so than much of our sort of peer countries, a lot of our economy is sort of in the hands of oligopolies. Telecoms being a great example. I mean, we have the highest cell phone rates in the world. Airlines being another example. We have some of the highest airline ticket rates in the world. It's usually just because there's not a lot of competition. Any competitor who wants to come in, there's any number of European and U.S. telecom companies who would love to come in and absolutely spank the competition with lower rates, but we don't let them in for whatever reason. Enough of the economy is doing that Gagne and Delorier said there's just not as much investment in the future. There's not as much competition. So they say, basically, we have a private sector that, takes a lot of Fridays off and is kind of out of the office by 3. And compared to peer countries, just, isn't really adding value. They just kept, doing the same thing for decades and decades, so that overall productivity is suffering. So we're just not seeing the same level of sort of investments and innovation that you would see, even in other countries in Europe that you would assume would be super complacent and lazy and just getting worse and worse. So Canada is sort of at the top of the pack for just kind of running out of steam.
Right. You also mentioned immigration. Obviously, we've had an unprecedented level of immigration last year. So again, let's unpack that a little bit. How does that factor in? On one level, it's a good thing because every additional person is a consumer and a potential producer. But you make the point that per capita, it obviously doesn't help us. So if you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. So if you're massively growing the economy by 1 million, which is beyond unprecedented. This is even higher than the pre-World War I. So this is when we just open up the prairies and we're just shoveling people in from Eastern Europe. Where proportionally that's still higher back then, but on just a per the raw number of immigrants is higher now than at any other point in our history. So yes. Any economist you talk to, anybody who sort of deals in finance is going to say, yeah, obviously Canada needs immigration and needs relatively high immigration as compared to the rest of the world. And that's kind of the way we've done it throughout our entire history. But when you dial it up, by factor, tenfold in a very short period of time, without that really connecting to broader economic needs. So this isn't really the private sector saying, we need 1 million people overnight.
Right.
What you're doing is you're having economic growth is appearing to grow, but it's shared among fewer and fewer people. So, I think sort of, unchecked immigration, that doesn't really make sense from an economic basis, which is kind of a new thing. Canada's whole thing with immigration, and I think one of the reasons we're such a pro-immigration country is because we're so, nakedly cynical about why we do it. The point system introduced in the 1970s was just, we have high immigration because we want, people who are going to add to the economy and we can tax to death and, prop up all our things. We've been quite, we've been quite open about why we bring in immigrants, purely for economic value. This is sort of a very unique Canadian innovation. Previously, earlier in our history, it was sort of race-based, like, we need stocky Eastern Europeans to develop things. So the idea of just, we have high immigration, because they sort of add to the economy. But I think, recently, if you're just seeing numbers that I've even spoke to some really pro-immigration people personally from an economic standpoint, and they're like, if you just throw in this many people overnight, it's going to completely screw up healthcare, housing. If you're not sort of dialing up credential recognition, yeah, it's just going to absolutely overwhelm the system. And, this mantra of more immigrants equals more economic production, yeah, that's true when you're talking like an extra 50,000 on top of your 400,000 that you were bringing in. But again, 1 million is just so far beyond anything we've ever seen.
All right. With that, we're going to take one more break with our guest, Tristin Hopper, a journalist at the National Post. We'll be back after these messages. Please stay with us.